Welcome to episode 43 of Lost in Translation with Bobby Martin. We are coming to you, as we typically do, from our WCTV studios in Wilmington, Massachusetts. Our guest is a Massachusetts guy, but is coming to us from Florida. That is a professional basketball player. Amazing, amazing story. Nick Minnerath. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Appreciate you guys having me.
We appreciate you being here.
So, I wanted to have Nick on for a while because I know he's a Mass guy, but has lived a really remarkable story. And even though he's from Massachusetts, he's from Cape Cod. He was a year-rounder, and I think most people don't understand what life was like there. I'll leave a lot of this for him to tell. Nick, I just kind of want to ask, at this point now, you're 35, I believe, what would you say about your journey and about the sport of basketball, what it means to you at this point?
Yeah, so, I'm turning 36 here in, another 2 months. And, if I had to describe my career in, any particular way, it would be, one with zero regret. Just so grateful for the opportunity. Like I said, everybody has a different path. Not everybody is going to have so many people think that, I'm not following the same path as this guy or that guy. I'm not going in the right direction. It's never like that. I try to tell people that all the time, during their careers. Never compare yourself to other people's careers, no matter where you are in yours at that moment, because no two lives are the same. So, my career, I have zero regret. I'm just so grateful for everything that basketball has given me.
So where did basketball begin for you? How did you get into the sport? And was it always like, I love this sport, or like, where did it all start?
Yeah, I think for most kids, I played basketball my whole life growing up. I was in love with it, wanted to be in the NBA. But, as we'll talk more, kind of about like, what Cape Cod is really like. Once I got to about middle school, that dream kind of just faded away. Basketball was, as far as playing professionally, it didn't really seem like any reality. Again, mostly because, like I said before we started filming, it's not about, what people are capable of. It's about what they have knowledge of. And, especially at that time on the Cape, there was just no knowledge of anything regarding college sports, going professionally, how to do it, where to train, anything like that. So, I was just basically stuck. It was just nothing more than something that we just did with our friends for fun. After middle school, there was no, oh, I'm going to go here and then continue to play professionally. It was nothing more than fun.
So I'm interested to know, as a kid, we watch, the professional players, and, we really start to get into, we start dreaming about what we want to become. So down on the Cape, when you were that young, what were the grade school coaches? Because you're saying this was middle school, right? This was middle school where you were dreaming about those things, and there was nothing after middle school. It's because it's amazing that there were no mentors or tutors around there just to help you figure things out.
Yeah, like I said, the best way that I can describe the Cape is basically being in some really, really, really small, like Hobunk town in the middle of nowhere, United States. That's the only way you can describe it. It is part of Massachusetts, but it's not part of Massachusetts. It really is its own little like island world. I was there because I moved around a lot as a kid, and so I was there. My dad, he worked for the National Park Service, so we moved around a lot, and then we settled there when I was in first grade. And that's the only reason why we ended up there, was because of my father's job. And so it was an amazing place to grow up. Don't get me wrong, as a kid, but like once you get past that elementary school age, the opportunities, they're just dead. That's the best way to describe it. There's no, you go to school just like everybody else, but there's no there's no expectation when it comes to sports, especially back then. There was no social media. There was no, you would just play the sport, didn't matter what it was, and then you would go home at the end of the day. None of the coaches had anything to say about training, about, you know, staying in school.
Right.
Like, especially like once we got to high school, you know, so it was elementary school, middle school, and then obviously high school. And then once high school came around, it was even worse because there was just literally nobody other than you had the head coach, and then that was it. There was nobody on the sideline taking players in. Hey, we need to do this. We need to keep your grades. If you do this, you have this opportunity. If your grades aren't great, you can still go to a junior college. There was nothing. It was just play, go home. There was never any communication of like trying to get players to the next level. Can they go to the next level? To be straight with a player, like if you're a coach, you know somebody's not going to play Division I, you still want to give them opportunities. Hey, you can still use basketball or sports as something else to get to that next level. But again, there was nothing going on the Cape at the time. They didn't care whether you dropped out, whether you played sports, whether you didn't play sports. None of that stuff mattered. So it was all on you. And it's not that it's hard. Again, it's a different time back then. And it sounds funny, like it's 40 years ago, but it was, you know, it was about 15, 20 years ago, but in reality, it just seems like the Cape was just so far behind. It was almost like it was the 70s or 80s because, you know, great parents, you know, I had everything that I needed, but it's hard to expect your parents who haven't been down that road of sports and scholarships to have that type of knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, that's where you really need to lean on schools and coaches. And there was none of that on the Cape at the time. So like my parents, they didn't understand anything about junior college. They didn't understand anything about what life is like after high school unless somebody was telling them. And so luckily I was given that opportunity by a family friend after high school. But during those years of high school and middle school, they left everything solely up to you. And it's and I'm sure it hasn't changed that much.
You know, I worry. So we're in Wilmington, Mass, where we record, which is a small town, but it's in, you know, it's a little bit north of Boston, a little bit east of Lowell. I grew up in Cambridge, which is a city. Bobby lives in a suburb now. He grew up in Atlantic City, which is a city. You know, I live in Lowell, so I still live in a city. But like, you look at like when you're choosing for your kids and like, oh, good school system. That's oftentimes in the suburbs and whatever. But I worry so much about suburban life. I've never experienced it, or forget suburbs. I worry so much about suburban life, but even just like out in the middle of nowhere life. You know, growing up, when I would meet kids from the burbs, they would be like, "Oh my God, you're from the city!" Like, "Oh, the drugs and guns and violence and everything." And I'm like, I didn't see hard drugs till I got to college, like, because there's always something to do in the city. I worry about my kids if we wind up, because they're very young, if we wind up living in more of a suburb, and it's like, okay, yeah, good school systems, but there's way less to do. Like when you were a kid outside of hoops, once you got to that age where, say the age that public libraries and museums are no longer enough to just hold your interest and make you happy, and playing with Legos is not, and you're looking for stuff to do, like what do you do living on, and you live on the outer Cape is my understanding. What do you do as a kid, a youth, a young teen, a mid-teen? What do you do out there to get by? Because outside of the summer when all the tourists are there, like it's not a lot going on.
Yeah, you know, like you just said, I mean, it's especially on the Cape. I grew up in Truro, so you know the Cape is almost worse than growing up, like I said, in some small town. At least in some small town, you have some sort of a reality. Not to paint like a bad picture of small towns or anything like that, but a lot of small towns have poverty and a lot of these things. The Cape just doesn't have that. So you're growing up on the Cape. I was there simply because of my father's job at the time. We weren't wealthy. We were lower middle class, blue collar, hardworking. You work to pay your bills situation. But the most of the Cape is wealthy people, like family roots, ties, all that stuff. So you just don't have that that hunger of like, I gotta play sports. I need to go to school. I need to get something to get off of the Cape. Mm-hmm. You just don't have that because everybody's just kind of settled in like, okay, I'm going to spend the rest of my life here on the Cape, work for my family's business, whatever it might be. Whereas even in a small town elsewhere, you still have people who are like hungry to get out. Like
Right.
there's reasons to get out. The Cape is just so filled with people who are just comfortable with being on the Cape for the rest of their life, born and raised, stay there forever. And that's the worst part about it. And like you said, yeah, I grew up in Truro, so I grew up at like the very, very end of the Cape. You get up towards like Falmouth, and that's where the Cape spreads out a little bit. But I mean, I grew up on a area where that's a mile wide. You have the ocean on both sides. The population was like 50,000 in the summer and like 4,000 for the rest of the year. And there's just nothing. There's nothing to do. As a kid, of course, you find little things to do outside. But as you get older, I mean, you're looking for, well, what can I really do? And for me, it ended up being drugs. And what ends up being for a lot of kids now is even worse than it was when I was back younger. Now it's even heavier drugs, like the heroin epidemic and people dying that were in my class is terrible. And it's even worse now. But that's really just what it leads to. What do you do when you're that bored? There's just really nothing.
Wow.
Like, again, the Cape has not changed that much. It's been 20 years since I was in high school, but it really hasn't changed. Back then, there was nowhere to play basketball in the wintertime.
Yep.
There was one gym that opened up in Eastham that was like 20 minutes from my house. It was the first like public, like YMCA type gym. And again, this is 20 years ago, and they were charging $120 a month for a membership. Right. This was 20 years ago. And when they opened it up, and it was like, we just couldn't believe it. I mean, I think I had a membership for like a month here, a month there, if my parents could afford it, you know what I mean? But like, that was it. There was no opportunity, nowhere to go, just play basketball indoors. And if you know anything about the Cape, I mean, it's freezing, it's windy for 9 months a year. So you're not playing outside other than the summertime, really. And it just breeds negative habits. That entire environment. Great for kids, great for people who can afford it to go there in the summertime and enjoy their life. But as far as like raising kids, raising a family, there's just no way. When I left the Cape at 21 years old, I said I was never going back. I was never going back.
You left the Cape at you said at 21. What happened in high school? Because when you read on your high school career, you would think before you know anything else, hey, this dude's you're what? Like, I think you're listed at maybe 6'10", when you're 6'9", 6'10".
Yeah, I mean, I grew a little bit after high school. I mean, now I'm about, probably close to 6'9". In high school, I think I was about 6'6" at the most when I was a senior.
Still, even 6'6", you're an athlete. From what I've seen, athletic skilled. So you've got to think, hey, this guy went on to a really long pro career and some really high levels. He was probably, and you look at, you might be the only pro that was like a real true Cape Cod resident to become a pro hooper, certainly within the last 50 years from what I've seen. There's not many. You would think, oh, that kid must have killed it. He went to the public regional high school on the Outer Cape, Nauset High, but you didn't really have much of a high school career or resume. Can you take us through what happened with high school ball?
Yeah, like I said, so after middle school, it was right into high school, and it was immediately into just negative behavior. Once you got into high school, it just seemed like, there was so much freedom. As a freshman in high school, just immediately hanging around the wrong people. This was back when they didn't they didn't count your tardies and stuff like that. They didn't start doing that until I was like a sophomore. And so, I mean, we skipped every day. I skipped every single day. I never went to a full day of school. And I was on the team as a freshman. I failed off because I never went to school. So, like for grades in high school, usually you're failing off, you're missing basically half the year. So like you fail off, it's like sometime in January, you don't have the grades. And so you miss half the season. So my freshman year, I failed off. My sophomore year is the only year I finished in high school. So my sophomore year, I actually went to a little bit more classes, ended up finishing. Again, I was never like a really successful basketball player. I had a lot of potential, but I had nobody guiding me. Everything was just for fun, just going out on the court, no real confidence, just kind of just having fun and getting through it. So there was no like, oh, wow, this kid really has potential. It was nothing like that. And then when I was a junior, I had my car license now. So now I was never going to school. Once I got my license, I was never going to school. So once again, I failed off. Senior year came around. I was really dedicated. I was like, okay, I have 1 year left to not be a total mess up. Like, I'm going to at least try to get something going. And 2 games into the season, I was playing basketball. I went for alley-oop, and I came down, broke my ankle. Boom, season was over. And so that was just kind of like a snowball effect of my whole life up to that point. As soon as I broke my ankle, it was just straight back into just parties, drugs, nonstop, just 24/7. I don't know how I graduated high school. Again, a family friend put me in a work study program. So at the time you could have a work study during your high school. So basically they were pretending I was working a job for them. So I was getting credit for going to class, but all I had was 2 gym classes and 1 history class my whole senior year. That's all I had to do is go to school. And then the rest of the time I had no job, but they had me in a work study program because they knew I wasn't going to go to school either way. So every day I skipped. I had 2 gym classes and a history class, and somehow I ended up graduating. I finished with like a 1.7, which was like the state's legal obligation to actually graduate you at the time. And once I got my diploma, like that was it. I had forgot all about basketball up at that point. I had no interest in anything. I had no knowledge of anything. So for me, it was just, wow, I graduated high school. Like I can do whatever I want in this life. I had no idea what I had set myself up for and how hard my life was truly going to become at that point.
So I'm interested to know. I was raised by my grandmother, and in Atlantic City, you do some sneaky things. So my question is, you say you went down there with your dad, right? So did your dad? I mean, what was the relationship between you and your dad? I mean, did he know? Were you two fighting through this? Were you sneaking around?
No. So, I grew up with, 2 great parents. They got divorced when I was younger. But still two great parents, great relationship with both. Obviously rough times, during those years in high school, but still like super close with my parents. No problems, nothing like that. So yeah, I was sneaking around, but again, I don't even know how to really explain it. It was just almost like the knowledge at the time. Again, when you come from like a really just like blue collar work, pay bills type family, there's not this like, oh wow, like we really need to make sure like you're getting your grades up, going to school, like we really need to focus you on sports. That mentality just wasn't there because there's just no other parents around, no other people around that are kind of pushing that image. Like you go to like Michigan, you go to all these other places, like sports rules, like high school, like it's serious business. Like kids are trying to do things. You go on the Cape, there's no pressure, there's no nothing. So again, no, I had a great relationship with my parents. I was just on the Cape. Again, it is a different time now. It's 2024. It is a little different on the Cape, but even now, I mean, there was just so much freedom as kids. Like we would just disappear. Even as like young kids, we would just grab our bikes and we'd just be gone the entire day. Yeah. So there was never this worry of like, man, where's everybody at? You have all these weird people around, especially back then on the Cape. It was just, we would just grab our bikes and we would just be gone all day, every day. There was no worry about anything. And so you didn't have to, as a parent, worry so much about your kids, right, as you do like basically anywhere else in the world. So it was kind of just bred that freedom of, and then it continued into high school. And again, I had no beef with my parents. It was just, obviously I was keeping them separated from all the bad things I was doing. But there was nothing they could have done to stop it, even if they wanted to. When you get into that mentality, especially like, as I said, I got into more serious drugs, cocaine, doing like really serious stuff. Like you can't help people like that. You can tell them and try to guide them. But when you get into that junkie mentality, there's nothing anybody can say or do. It doesn't matter what's in front of you. Like you're going to do what you're going to do until you decide to change.
So you talked about you didn't know when you first graduated and you were like, hey, I got my car, I graduated. You didn't know. You said how hard times were going to get, and I know there's a gap between when you graduate and when you first wind up playing at a JUCO. Can you take me through what happens during that time? What happens in your life, and just how long and what happens, and then how do you wind up back with basketball when by the time you graduated, was the 1 year you said you were really serious about it. 2 games in, broken leg, not thinking about hoops anymore.
Yeah,
then,
so for me, high school was a wrap.
Yeah.
As soon as senior year was over, it was a wrap. That's when I started, like I said, I broke my ankle. That's when I started to really get into like heavy drugs. You know, I had a broken ankle. I was getting Vicodin prescriptions. It just snowballed into a lot more things like cocaine, and basically that just ended up into something that we were doing every single day. And on the Cape, there was only one junior college at the time. They didn't have any sports teams other than like intramural stuff. So it was 4Cs is what it was called, Cape Cod Community College. I don't know what it is now. But I went there right after high school. So I enrolled, I went there for 1 semester, and I actually did pretty well in my classes. I was only taking a couple of classes, but again, this was like an hour 10 I had to drive to get there, which wasn't that big of a deal. I was going like 3 days a week. And then basically my drug addiction had just taken complete control at that point towards the end of that semester. And then the second semester, I just dropped out. I stopped going completely, ended up dropping out. And at that point, I was just like completely snowballing. So that was the 1 year. And then the following year was just me doing that for like the next 8 months. I was just doing nothing other than just partying, again, doing coke, just a complete wreck, snowballing out of control. And I had tried to quit. It had been about a year doing that. And I was trying to quit. It was around, I want to say August. I had quit a few times, relapsed a few times, and a family friend knew this guy from New York. Can't remember his name for the life of me. I apologize to him, but he knew another guy from Michigan who was coach of the junior college team, Steve Finnemore. And it's crazy because the junior college was in Jackson, Michigan, where like my whole side of the family is. My mom's side is all from Jackson, like born and bred. And so like the coincidence is crazy. It really is fate. And so he said, here's his email. You can email him. And I put it off for like 4 months. I didn't email him. I was still just completely, I was like, I don't even want to know if I want to go back to school. Like what can I really get out of that? I was just scared. I was really scared. And so like after 4 or 5 months, my sister ends up moving off the Cape. So she was going kind of through a similar thing like me. She wasn't in the kind of hole I was in, but she was still struggling. And so my dad was really trying to push her to leave. And his sister lives in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so she was moving out there for a little while. Me and my dad were going to drive her. So we drive out there. And while I was out there, I went to a YMCA one morning, and there was a bunch of guys hooping. And so I got in the run, and I haven't touched a basketball in like almost a year and a half. I haven't done anything. And I mean, I was just out there and I was just killing these dudes, dunking it, running up and down, all this type of stuff. And these guys were like, man, where do you play? Where do you go to school at? Do you go to school around here? And I was like, fuck, man, I haven't done anything in a year and a half. I've been sitting on the couch. And like the disappointment in these guys' face, they were like, what? Like they were just disgusted. They were like, what are you talking about? You don't play basketball? And I was like, nah, man, I don't do shit. And they just couldn't believe it. And like at that moment, it kind of all just changed for me. At that moment, it was just like, man, it really hit me in the face. Like I've really been wasting my life. And at that point, I had been sober for like about a month. I had finally quit doing drugs, and I was really trying to sober up. I was trying to quit smoking. I was smoking a pack of cigarettes a day for like 2 years. And at that point, I quit doing drugs, and I was, winding down smoking cigarettes and trying to quit all that stuff. And so we were there only about 2 weeks, and then we went back to the Cape, drove back. And when I got back to the Cape, it was like, okay, I sent the guy an email, Steve Finnemore at the junior college. He gets back to me. He's like, when the season's over, you can come out and, do like an open run with us. I can't promise you anything more. I'll take a look at you. And like, that was it. And so at the time I was working construction. I'd worked a bunch of jobs. Like I was a taxi driver. I worked at a gas station. At that moment in time, I was working construction. And that is what really changed like everything for me, was working construction. At the time I was getting paid $9 an hour. working 7 to 3 on the Cape. I mean, the worst job I've ever had in my life, bar none. Like, that job solely motivated me probably more than anything that I've ever experienced. I was like, if I had to do this job the rest of my life, I would kill myself. I mean, there was just no way that I could be that person, work that job, and live any sort of like functioning life. So like working that job for like 8 months is what really motivated me, because I was working that job the whole year, waiting until their season was over to drive out there. And it was about April of my second year out. So this would have been like, so 2 years out of high school. April comes around and he's like, yeah, come out. So me, my dad, and my dad's girlfriend at the time, who his girlfriend knew the guy who introduced me to Steve Finnemore. So we just got in the car. We were supposed to be there on Monday for the workout. We left Saturday, drove 15 hours just straight there to Michigan. One day, stayed in a hotel. Next day, I went to the open run. I killed. He signed me on the spot, gave me a scholarship. We finished all the paperwork, everything that same night. And then I drove back to the Cape another 15 hours the next day, and it was a wrap. And then 6 months later, I was due to go to junior college and kind of start my life over.
Wow, that's an amazing journey. I'm interested to know. You said that the job of $9 an hour really woke you up. Right now, this was during the time construction. This was the time when you were trying to stay clean, right? So what?
Yeah, this was like I had just got clean. I just got clean.
So what stopped you? What stopped you from falling back? Because $9 an hour, I mean, you can't even live off of it. You can't buy groceries, gas, anything. So what stopped you from falling back into that rut of of drug use?
Like I said before, I even had gotten that job. So like when I eventually quit, I mean, there had been so many times where I was quitting and I wasn't quitting. And, one of the major instances, I almost died on my friend's front yard. It was like the middle of December. We had been doing coke all night in my car. And I literally thought my heart was going to explode. So I got out of the car. It was like 10 degrees outside. I got out of the car. I had stripped down basically to my underwear, and I was just sweating. To this day, I think I would have probably died if it was summertime, but it was so cold. I was literally lying on the yard of my friend's house, just staring up at the sky, thinking that I'm gonna die here. And I was just looking up at the stars for like an hour. Yeah. And then finally it passed. My heart didn't stop. And you would think that would wake me up, but no, we just got back in the car and continued to do what we were doing. And that moment, like about a week later, I was on another bender and I was up all night at my house. And I just remember, like it was yesterday, I remember I was looking in the mirror at my house where I grew up, and it was like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. I hadn't slept in like 2 days. And I was just looking at myself in the mirror, and I had never been so disgusted in my life. I couldn't believe this is the person that I had become and who I was.
So you were disgusted
because I was
yourself.
Just nothing.
You were disgusted.
Yeah, I was nothing. I was such a carefree kid growing up, such a happy kid, and I had just become just such a junkie. I mean, a junkie. Just no feelings, just basically just existing. And I couldn't believe that's where I had ended up. And at that moment, that's when I ended up quitting for good. I couldn't believe the person I had become. And at that moment I quit, and I didn't leave my house. Back then they didn't have social media. They didn't have any of that stuff. So like I had a cell phone, boom, I erased all the numbers inside of it. All the drug dealers, all my friends who I thought were my friends who weren't shit, they were just enabling, we were just enabling each other. And I didn't leave my house for like a month and a half. I didn't do anything. I just sobered up, stayed there. And then after that is when I ended up going to Nebraska. So it was like I had been sober for about 2 months at that point. And like I said, yeah, when I got back from Nebraska, I was like, okay, I need to get a job. And when that construction job came up, I was expecting more money. I mean, I was still living at home, so I didn't have like rent and all that, but still, I went to the job site, went straight to the foreman and asked for the job. And he was like, yeah, sure. How's $9 an hour sound? And I wanted to just turn around and walk away. I was sick. I thought he was going to say like $20 an hour. He said 9. I was just absolutely sick. I had no choice. I had nothing going. So I just accepted and, ended up working there for like 9 months or whatever. But absolutely the worst job I've ever had in my life.
So again, when you went through this and you were trying to get clean for that, 6 weeks that you stayed in the house, how tough was that for you? Because I'm sure there are other kids out here who, who are going through some similar things. They may not turn out as well as you did. I mean, you seem to get it together. I mean, did you go through help from any organizations, or was this just
nothing? And again, this is just, there is a lot of organizations, and like I'm not knocking places like rehab facilities. I mean, they all have their place, but I don't know. I come from like a mentality where I really don't believe in like any of that stuff. If that's your thing, that's great, whatever it takes to help. But I come from like a mentality of like, nobody is ever gonna like help you change you. It's only gonna be you. It's you against you. People can be there and support you, but to people who are always like, oh, you got to send, I have, trust me, family members and people that are dealing with similar things now. And it's like, oh, we got to get them into rehab. We got to get them to doing, and I'm always just like, listen, like you can't expect people to go to these places and change when they have no intention of changing. Like you have to hit that wall to where there's nothing left. Like I truly believe you have to be at completely ground zero before you're ever willing to change. And on the Cape there, again, there was just nothing. There was none of that stuff anyways. So there wouldn't have been anywhere to even reach out. But for me, I had nothing to look forward to. It's not like I was like, oh, I really need to sober up for basketball. It wasn't like that. It was just, I was really just, my back was against the wall. And I just knew that, I had nothing. I was 21. I was 20 years old at the time. I had literally zero money to my name. I couldn't even put I was going to the gas station putting like 50 cents in my tank. And I remember this guy I worked with was like, are you fucking kidding me? And he gave me some money to put in my gas tank. Because everything I was doing, I was spending on dope. I had no money for anything else. And I had hit that wall. I was at ground zero. So, I had no expectation of like my life moving forward. I just knew where I was at. And if I continued that I'd be dead. So that was my only motivation, was just to at least change the immediate.
That's an awesome story. I so appreciate that you shared that.
Yeah, it is really, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, man. That is really remarkable. Just getting clean is remarkable. I have friends that have battled addiction. I got into some of the same stuff that you were in at one point in life, and so I can totally understand it. But, so that's just remarkable. And if the story stopped there and it's just like you got clean and then led a average life that was unremarkable, it's still a remarkable story just there to get clean after that. But your story is only just beginning, even though that's almost like a complete story in and of itself right there. You get clean, now you're going across the country. You're not someone that you ever really put a lot into school. You're not someone that has been experienced with like high-level basketball up until now, with what it takes to be a college athlete. You said, in the Cape, it was hard to be able to even just train year-round because lack of facilities, lack of everything when the weather's terrible. What's that first year at a JUCO, being part of a basketball program, being able to play, what's that year like when you get there?
When I left the Cape, it was, again, at this point, I was definitely in like a good mental state. So when I left the Cape, my car was packed, again, another moment I'll never forget. I get emotional just even thinking about it. Car was all packed up, and I just remember driving away from my house and my dad, and I was just looking in the rearview mirror, and I just remember saying, like, I'm never coming back. There's no option of me coming back. And I drove out there, by myself, about 17 hours to Jackson, and I got there, got to the dorms, moved in, and it was just I was all in. Because I knew I already had my second and third chances. Like, I was done. If I screwed this up, like, I was done. Yeah, sure, I was clean, and like, that's great. That's a positive place to start. But I had this opportunity that was so big in my mind. For some people, again, if I hadn't gone through what I did prior to that point, I might have not taken advantage of it, because anybody who knows anything about junior college, it's a jungle. I mean, it's a jungle, and it's really no different than almost like where I was at mentally when I was a junkie. I mean, you have just everybody in junior college, the fuck ups, the junkies, the druggies, the guys who are 40 years old who are coming back trying to make it. I mean, junior college really is a jungle. And so if I hadn't have already been in that place of just complete self-destruction, I could have ended up there just by going to junior college and being around that again. But when I got out there, I was just so locked in to what I had to do. I had no intention of doing anything other than school and basketball. And I pulled up to the dorms, unloaded my stuff. The next day was like an interpretation day. They got everybody situated. And we had an open run like that next day that I was there. Open run in the gym. And again, I had full confidence in like my abilities. Like I didn't have any sort of like skill set, but I've always been super athletic, even since I was a kid. So, I mean, like, even when I was a junkie, I could still like do windmills and do like, all this crazy stuff. So I always had athleticism. So I knew I had that potential. I just needed some sort of guidance. But when I got out there and we went to the open run, I mean, I had still been smoking a lot. I hadn't quit completely. I'd quit the hard drugs, but at the time I was still smoking a lot of weed. I'll be honest with you. And so when I got out there, I was literally 2 trips up the court. I was so gassed. I felt like my lungs were going to explode. And I was like, this needs to change. So immediately from that first day on campus, I was running like 6-7 miles every single day. I would go to class. I would go to the gym, run circles around the gym, 6-7 miles for like the first month and a half before we started. We started like October 1st as a team doing like some stuff. And so every single day, I was just running 7 miles every single day, getting my cardio up, not worrying about anything other than being in great shape. And then when the season rolled around, like I was just locked in. There was nothing. I was doing. People think it's funny. They always ask me, even when I went to Detroit, even when I was in junior college. I mean, I think I can count on one hand how many parties I went to in 4 years or 5 years of college, because I redshirted 1 year. I mean, maybe 4. 2 parties in junior college and maybe 2 in Detroit. I had done so much of that bullshit when I was my entire life, not just high school, my entire life from like 12 years old on. And so there was nothing fun about that for me, staying up late, drinking, doing all this stuff. There was just no enjoyment in that for me. So it was only sports, basketball, school. That's all I cared about. And like, I was just fully locked in. That's it.
You just answered my next question, because you went on to play professionally. And normally, when you get to a place, when you get to overseas, there is so much to do because you've never experienced it before. You can hang out, you're hanging out in the bars and, doing all the other stuff, the women. And, you had been through so much that, how was that transition? I mean, how did you feel when you finally got overseas and, you experienced that culture and so much to do, so much opportunity? How did you stay cool?
The opportunity aspect was, again, that was nothing to me. The other things involving overseas is what was hardest for me. Kind of like I said about junior college. I mean, when we finished the season in junior, my first season in junior college, we finished with like 5 players. We started with 17 and we finished with 5. We had like 8 people drop out or fail off the team, and then, or injuries or whatever. And I mean, that's just, again, normal in junior college. And so it could have been so easy for me just to be like that if I hadn't already gone through what I was doing. And going overseas, later on, it was just nothing for me. The only thing for me that has ever been difficult about overseas was my first season coming overseas, because I had never left America. That's the only thing that was difficult to me. I didn't have any knowledge of how anything worked. Cell phone service, text, video. I had no concept of other cultures, anything. That was the only aspect to me that was hard. The lifestyle part, the money part, like none of that had really ever had any issue for me.
So you kill it at JUCO, I assume. Year 2, from what I can tell, kind of more of a growth as a player, but continuing to kill it. And can you take me through that transition to Division I hoops and what that was like and how that came about?
Yeah, so like when I went to junior college, like the first season, like I only had expectation for 1 year. I said, I want to play 1 year, I want to kill, and then I want to go to a Division I college. And I did kill. I should have been Player of the Year twice. They gave it to some other kid from Lansing. It was just, in my opinion, it was a joke. I should have been Player of the Year twice. But then I went to the All-Star game at the end of the season. My first year, got MVP, and that's when I was like, all right, like I'm not coming back. But I had no Division I offers, and I just, at that time, I had no concept of like sports politics. I didn't know anything. And I'm expecting Michigan State to like be calling me like, yo, like we want you to come through. And like it never happened. And I couldn't understand any of that at the time, where they don't want people like me. They don't want fuck ups. They don't want people who look like me. They don't want people who have had my past. They don't want that type of material. And I didn't get that at the time. I thought it was simply like, if I go out and hoop, I'm going to get whatever I want. And the Michigan States, like they just never ended up calling. And I had a bunch of D2 offers my first year, but I didn't want that. I was like, I thought I was better than that. And then my second year, I came back again. Yeah, I did grow as a player. I was still super raw. I really, honestly, to be honest with you, I didn't really refine my game until my third year as a pro, like, to be honest. But I was still, being super productive. I got MVP the second year. I had a few Division I offers. I had like Missouri State, Seattle, some like smaller schools in Tennessee, all Division I mid majors, but really it came down to Eastern Michigan and UAD. And the coach at UAD at the time, Carlos Briggs, the assistant coach, he was on me from my first year. And I didn't have any interest. I put him on the back burner. Like I wasn't answering his calls all summer. Like after my first year, I was like, I don't want to go to Detroit. And I came back, and then he like ran up on me on campus my second year. And it was basically like, yo, like you've been ducking me all summer, blah, blah, blah. And again, at that time, I really didn't know how to operate in like this world. And so, I apologized, and we got off to a better foot. And I was like, I really just trying to focus on basketball and see where I can go this season. And he's just stayed on me the whole year. And again, it came down to Eastern Michigan and Detroit. And then UAD told me to come out to a game where, again, another moment I'll never forget. They were playing Butler on ESPN. And, I heard all this hype, from the coach. Oh, like, you got to come here. We got dogs. We got, this player, that player. We're playing on ESPN. We're this, we're that. And I was like, whatever. And I just didn't want to go to Detroit, basically, was the bottom line. And I'm driving into Detroit for this game. And again, Matt Jackson's only about an hour away. But I had only been to Detroit once with one of my friends, and we went to like the Trap, and I was like, this is horrible. And so I'm driving into this, I get off the highway. I'm with my girlfriend at the time. I get off the highway on Livernois Avenue. I don't know if you've ever been to Detroit, but I get off the highway on Livernois. Right when you exit onto Livernois off the highway coming from Jackson, like I said, I'll never forget that moment. It was like Baghdad or something that you see out of the movies. There's never seen a city that looked like this at the time. Detroit's come a long way. Don't get me wrong. They've done a lot of rebuilds, but even now, I got off the highway. It was like every other house, just whole blocks, abandoned houses, burned down houses. and it's like a 6 mile stretch just straight to the campus. And I'm just like, as soon as I got off the highway, I look at my girlfriend, I'm like, fuck no, I'm never coming to this school. I don't care what happens at this gym. I'm never going to UAD. And the game was obviously awesome. They played Butler, who was ranked at the time like 25. And, I met everybody and it was all good. The campus was really nice. It's right in the hood. So it's a small campus right in the hood, completely gated, secure. You go in there, you're like in another world. And yeah, like I said, I left that game and I was like, I'm never going to Detroit. It's never going to happen. And it really came down to like the end of the year. Basically, I was on the verge of just calling the Eastern Michigan guy and the coach and committing. And just, well, it was the decision was just, I don't want to say I was scared to go to Detroit, but Detroit had a lot more expectation. So like I knew I could go Division I to Eastern Michigan. I'd be comfortable. The team was in disarray at that time. It was terrible. Like there was no expectation. There was no pressure. I could just go there and I could have fun either way, but there was just no expectation for me when going there. Whereas Detroit, again, not to be racial, but it's like, I'm a white dude. I'm coming to Detroit. Like there's going to be expectation for me. Like I'm going to have to prove to everybody, like everybody's coming from my head. I'm coming to the team. Everybody's going to be coming from my neck. And I ended up making that decision. And I was like, this is going to be the toughest for me. So like, I need to go to Detroit. If I'm really going to like continue my career, this is going to be the best opportunity for me mentally and for my career. And I mean, it was a perfect decision. I mean, again, just being in Detroit, being around that, just the toughness level, the environment, it was the best thing for me.
I've got a question. Are you familiar with, he went to Detroit Mercy, a guy named Eli Holman?
Yeah, that's my guy. I played with him for 2 years.
Did you? Wow. So Eli had actually come to Boston. I was training him. I just finished my career and I was training him. And if you remember him, he was a fat fuck. Talented, but fat. And, him and his people, his pastor who was, taking care of him and, stuff like that. He used to always tell me about Detroit. And I'd never gotten out there to look at the guys, but Eli was coming in. I mean, I prepared him for the draft and, watched him go overseas and have a long career. And, when I heard Detroit Mercy, I mean, I just had so many great memories of Eli. And it just hit me. I remember you. Serious athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Serious athlete. I said, oh, my God, who this white boy? I said, look at him. I mean, you were a baller, man. You were tough. So it just came back to me. I'm like, oh, my goodness. Yeah. Right. So I'm sorry, it just hit me, so I had to mention it, man.
That's funny. Yeah, me and Eli, like in school and all that, like, again, when not just Detroit, but Detroit was almost like an extension of junior college. You had like almost exclusively all transfers, all junior college guys. So like everybody's ego was massive. Everybody was just like alpha male mentality. And so like me and Eli, we didn't get along that great, honestly. But we both wanted the same thing. We both wanted to play professional basketball. And, so in that fact, we knew what we had to do. And, he's a good guy. And it's funny, again, we didn't get along that great in college, but, we kept in touch and we actually ended up playing against each other in China. I mean, It's just crazy where this game takes you.
Yeah.
So I know you had big numbers your first year in Detroit, which is your junior year of eligibility. And then you get hurt your senior year. And that's almost the worst time to get an injury is your senior year. It's if it happens your freshman year, your sophomore year, even your junior year, it's like, pro teams, whatever, they'll look at you, he's still got multiple years to kind of bounce back. There's a guy I know who's out here. Bobby knows him. His name's Dan Callahan. He went to Northeastern. He's one of the best players in Northeastern history. Yeah. Played really high level overseas, but like he was like on the NBA team's radar, played well against like Duke and some other schools. and he got a back injury his senior year. And they basically told him, like, hey, if it had been earlier on in your career, you bounce back, you have multiple years of college. But he had a monster fifth-year senior season when he came back, but NBA teams had already basically written him off because of when that injury happened. Can you take me through that injury and what the recovery process was like now having to come back as a fifth-year senior when you think everything's leading to your senior year, and then boom, you get hurt, and now you have to rebound again?
Yeah, so I did have a successful first year, junior year. Again, we had such a massive team with so many egos where it was like there was nobody who was going to get off and get like 20, 25 a game. That just wasn't going to happen. There was too many egos, too many players. We had the coach's son, Ray McCallum, who's my guy. Don't get me wrong, but he's a coach's son.
Mm-hmm.
So like, he's getting the most taste out of everything. Everything revolved around that. So we were just everybody else was just, digging for scraps basically. And again, that's my guy. Coach Ray's a great guy. His son, great kid. But successful seats junior year and my senior year. Like I said, everything had led up to that. I was like, okay, I'm going to finish. My expectation was NBA, if not overseas. Like no matter what, I felt like I was going to play professionally. And yeah, it was like deja vu from high school again. Seriously, we were playing in Bowling Green. I can't remember. I think it was a preseason tournament. It wasn't just one game. We were there for like 3 days. We were playing a few teams, and this was right in the beginning of the season. And I was going for a rebound, which changed how I played forever. This moment, and I didn't get contact with somebody, and so I was under the rim, and somebody shot the ball, and I was just standing there, and I was just looking at the ball. And my teammate took a charge on the dude who drove and did like a floater or whatever. And my teammate like over-exaggerated his charge. So he flew backwards, and I got stuck between two people. And what happened was I had like one person on my hip, and then when my teammate took the charge, he landed directly on the side of my knee. And my knee just exploded. It was all the force, like my leg couldn't move, and he just went on it sideways and completely caved in my knee. And right when it happened, it was just the most unreal pain ever. And I crawled to the sidelines, and I just knew it was like the trainer came over, and he as soon as he looked at my knee, he was like, "Holy fuck!" Like he couldn't, like he was like, "Damn, like we got to get you to the back ASAP, get you to the hospital." There was nothing attached to so my MCL exploded. I tore my ACL and my MCL, but my MCL had just exploded on the interior side. And so like my leg was there was nothing keeping it attached. Mm-hmm. So it was just like swinging back and forth. There was nothing there. And yeah, man, that was just, again, in that moment, for those first few days, week, whatever, you're just sitting there mentally like, man, like, it's over. It's over. Like everything that I built up to that point got through, overcame. Like for me, it was just, I'm like, man, I can't believe it. It's over. I'm not going to play basketball again. And, once I got over that self-pity and just like driving myself into the ground, obviously it's going to be emotional for anybody. But, once I got to the hospital, I met with the team doctor, great doctor, does like all the Detroit Lions people injuries. So I asked him straight up, I was like, am I ever going to play basketball again? And, this guy was like real old school, just like straight to the point. And he was like, I don't know. And I was just, from that moment on, I was just, one step at a time. I wasn't getting ahead of myself. I mean, again, I knew nothing about overcoming injuries. I knew nothing about that. I had great people around me at this time, like my trainers and stuff. So I just had to trust them completely 100%. And, I got 2 surgeries. So within like a week of this happening, they did my MCL first. And because it literally exploded. So like what they did was they just like a rubber band, pulled it back out, and then like reattached it to the top of my knee. And when I tell you how painful that was, I mean, it felt like somebody was just tapping me with a sledgehammer on my kneecap for like 20 days straight. And again, I'm a recovering addict still to this point, still to this date, 15 years later. Excuse me. It's incredible, the drugs that they give you in a hospital. And it's no wonder why, so much of America is just messed up with prescription medicine. I mean, they were pumping my IV with stuff. When I tell you, I'm not over exaggerating. Like the stuff they were putting into my IV when I was in the hospital for my MCL, I could feel it inside my body for like almost a month. For like the 2 days I was in the hospital, I felt like I was high for almost an entire month, the amount of drugs they were putting into my IV. And so when I finished the first month and a half, and then I was scheduled to go back for my ACL. So I did my MCL. A month and a half later, I had my ACL surgery. And right after my MCL surgery, I mean, we were doing rehab like literally 3 days after surgery. Certain exercises, nothing lateral, just, little quad leg extension stuff. And then it was once I got my ACL, like I didn't take any of the prescription. Like the ACL was nothing compared to the MCL. So they did the ACL. I used my patella. And again, they said like, oh, like you might have knee pain the rest of your life if you use your patella, but it's the strongest thing you can use. And so I was like, didn't matter to me. I was like, I can tough it out if there's knee pain. I don't even care. Whatever works the best. So they did the surgery. Everything went well. And I mean, it was 6 or 7 days a week for the next 9 months. I mean, I worked out in the morning and I worked out in the afternoon. Like I said, I had the best trainer in the world, Mike Miller from the University of Detroit. I mean, this dude dedicated his life to me. I didn't go home that summer. I spent the entire year at Detroit, redshirted, sick, watching my team, not being able to play, just rehabbing every day. I didn't go home that summer. I stayed in Detroit the whole summer, rehabbing every single day, twice a day. And then, so that was in October when it happened. And then I got started doing back on the court stuff, September the following year.
Wow. That is quite the rehab. I had a really gruesome knee injury, but so I can relate in some regards with tearing everything in it and like a compound fracture. But like that I can't imagine with also worrying about the kind of addiction component with what they put in you at the hospital. So that I can't imagine that being easy. What?
Yeah, at that time I wasn't worried about like, relapsing or anything like that. I was so locked into what I was doing, but like I was just making a point. It's just disgusting how strong this stuff. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, the stuff they have in the hospitals. And there is there's times for that stuff, but it's just, it's hard to explain. I mean, when I came back, when you're not on the court for so long, you're not sure how you're ever going to come back. I mean, like I felt good. Like I had been rehabbing for like 6-7 months. You never really know how you're going to come back. So even if you feel good, until you actually get back on the court and you're doing 5-on-5, like I didn't know who I was going to be. I didn't know, because like my game had been tailored to being super athletic, super explosive. Yeah, I had other factors, but like was my identity. And I just had no concept of who I was going to be after that. So the whole time I was rehabbing, I was just like, man, if I can't come back and I can't jump, I better be like the best shooter you've ever seen. So I just worked on everything else on my game, shooting, touch, just everything other than jumping. Cause I was really like just worried, like, okay, I still think I still have to be able to play professionally, even if I can't jump anymore. Because again, in my eyes, I still had, again, not to say that I had nothing going for me. I mean, I was going to graduate. I had graduated with a 4-year degree, again, coming from the Cape at 20 years old. Now I'm finishing school. I graduated junior college with honors, got an associate's degree before I transferred. And then when I went to Detroit, my 5th year, I finished my 5th year in December. and, ended up, again, I graduated with honors from Detroit with a communication degree. So it's not like I was just going back to ground zero, but in my mind, again, it was like everything had been put into to playing basketball. And like, this is the only way in my mind that I knew how to like provide for like my future self was like through basketball. So everything, I just knew I had, no matter if I could ever jump again, I knew like I still had to do something to where I could, get paid to play basketball.
This story is absolutely amazing. I mean, I think it says so much about human nature. From what I've heard from you, I feel like I know you already. Your dedication, and I'm saying this, so I'm looking at this from two viewpoints. One, as a recovering addict, okay, that when you realized, when you looked in the mirror, you dedicated yourself to becoming a better version of yourself. And I think that itself tells me who you are. And I can see how you went through the rehab of your knee. I mean, in my opinion, I'm trying to look at this and I'm saying, okay, well, as an addict, you're all in just because you don't like who you are. There's something that's missing. But once you found something to say, you found it in yourself, not in anyone else, but you found it in yourself to say, I no longer want this, and I'm going to go for it to find that better version. And you still went through pain. And even that type of pain where your career was on the line, right? This horrible knee injury. You fought through it. You stuck it out. You did not relapse. And here you are today, still a recovering addict, saying, you know what, I realized that I had problems before. I've got to fight this every day. And you found your way into a long professional career. This is unbelievable. I love this story, man. This is great. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no problem, man. I truly believe that it sounds funny, but I truly believe that addicts are the strongest people. I mean, yeah, obviously it can go either way.
Yeah.
But people who are addicts and actually find their way out, they really are the strongest people because you become addicted to everything.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing that I do that I'm not addicted to. Like if I started smoking again, let's say I picked up cigarettes, I'm not just going to pick up, I'm going to go straight to a pack a day again. Like there's no balance in my life whatsoever. If I say I'm going to work out every day, I get up at 5 every day and I work out. I mean, there's no such thing as like doing something sometimes for me, or for most addicts. It's like, if I'm doing something, I'm doing it all the time, and it has to be immediate. I got to start right now. It goes like that for everything in life. And plus I'm OCD. And so it's just like,
Right.
I come back from overseas with like 12 bags, 12 suitcases, and like everything has to be unpacked that night and back to being organized. And like, there's just no waiting. And so, the addict mentality. And it's like, not to like over exaggerate, but you hear Kobe stories now that he's dead and, rest in peace. But you hear, oh man, he was in the gym, 12 hours a day, and like that. People over exaggerate sometimes, but like when I was rehabbing in college, I mean, like the gyms, the training center and the gym, my senior year, like the trainers wouldn't show up till like 8. And I had class at like 8:30, and so I would break into these doors were like old school, so I would use a credit card to break into the training room just so I could use the Stairmaster an hour before anybody got there.
Right.
And they would show up and ask me how I got in there, and I would just tell them the janitors let me in and blah blah blah. But I mean, it was just like I felt like really that's what it took, because I had classes and I was still trying to do everything, but I was never willing to like run my life on like other people's schedules. It was like I knew exactly what I had to do, and like I was gonna get in the time no matter what.
So you were worried, you said, obviously about, as everyone is after they have a catastrophic knee injury, and for someone whose game was based so much on athleticism to begin with, at least. What's it like when you get back out there on the court, and where was your athleticism when you returned to like your new ceiling after the injury? Was it still there? Was it noticeably different?
I think like for most people with knee injuries, it's the mental side for sure is like the biggest thing. Like I was wearing a knee brace for like my senior year. I didn't get rid of that for like a year. So like I knew I had confidence like when I was on the court with the knee brace, the ACL thing, where I was like, okay, I can go hard. Like the brace is supposed to stop you from like overextending or whatever. So I did have that sort of confidence. And as weak as like my knee had become, I had spent 9 months rehabbing it. So I was surprised. I actually hadn't really lost that much athleticism. I was still getting up. I was still doing everything. It took about maybe like a year, but I mean, honestly, if I had to say like when I was in junior college, honestly, my vertical was probably like 41. Like I had like crazy bounce. And after my surgery, I would say I was still up there. I was probably like 36, 37. So I was still like a high riser, still getting up. And I just felt like I had worked on other parts of my game so much that, again, it's hard to look at something so like catastrophic as like beneficial. But honestly, it changed my mentality. It changed my mind. It made me stronger. Like you can say all those things afterwards, but honestly, like it really did. Like I would not be the same player that I went on to be if I had not had that injury. It just never would have happened. So I played my senior year. I did really well, got all conference, and, I went into like the pre-draft stuff, and like, that's when things started to take off. Again, I thought I was going to get drafted. I was pretty delusional at that point. I still didn't understand politics at this point in my career. And I went to, what was it called? Not the Combine. The Combine, there's the other one.
Portsmouth?
It was in Virginia.
Portsmouth.
Yeah, Portsmouth.
Yeah.
So I get an invite to Portsmouth at like the last minute. And, the school that, they get my ticket, they send me out there. And, again, I didn't know anything about that. I just knew it was like a perfect situation for me. It was kind of like an open run, organized, but like open run, type of system. And so like I killed. I went out to Portsmouth and I killed. And I ended up getting like 12 workouts. 12 NBA teams called me for workouts just from that Portsmouth. Before that, I think I had like one. Okay. Yeah, so before that, I had like one scheduled NBA workout. And then after Portsmouth, I had like 12. So like that whole summer, I was just nonstop. It was like, every other day I was, going to Boston or going to Indiana or going to, DC. And I'll be honest, like I don't ever remember having a bad NBA workout. I honestly feel like I killed every single workout I ever went to. I remember killing dudes that were going first round. And I was in Indiana, and this is when I really kind of got a wake up call. Like I was in Indiana, and I just murdered this workout. I killed everybody at this workout, and then we were in the training room after the fact, and the guy was asking me, "Oh, like you're really flexible," and then he saw my knee, and he was like, "What happened here?" Blah blah blah, and I was like, I was telling him the story. And then he was like, "Oh, did the team give you an MRI and this and that?" And I was like, "No." He was like, "Oh, like they're never going to draft somebody if they don't do that." And so that's when I was kind of like, not that I was wasting my time, but I just felt like all these teams that I was working out for and killing, again, not that I was wasting my time. It's all beneficial, but I just don't think any of them were really taking me seriously. It kind of goes back to like Portsmouth. I remember kind of like what I said about how like Michigan and Michigan State teams, like they didn't want guys like me who look like me. And at Portsmouth, after I killed, like that first day, I had meetings with three different teams. And I'll never forget, the first meeting I had was with the Utah Jazz. And I'm in this hotel room with two dudes from the Jazz, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just sitting there answering the guys' questions. One guy's asking me questions, and then the other dude who's sitting there, I'm not exaggerating, he never made eye contact with me. All he did was look at my tattoos for like 25 straight minutes. And I just remember thinking how weird it was. And I was just like, about 2 hours later, my agent calls me and he's like, "Oh, like, how did the Jazz thing go? Like, they called, they said you seem disinterested. Like, They said it seemed disrespectful. And I just couldn't believe it. I was just taken aback. I was like, this is the biggest bullshit I've ever heard in my life. I was nothing but respectful. I just sat there and answered their questions. They said, oh, you act like you didn't want to be there. I was like, that is so far from the truth. That's right when I understood. I was like, wow, there's really people out here who are still just judging a book by its cover.
Yes.
without knowing anything about somebody. I mean, in the game of basketball, you would think you're surrounded by people who are tattooed and this and that. But I mean, this dude, all he did was look at my tattoos, and I just had a bad feeling. And as soon as I left, that's what it was. And then I had my other meeting was with the Spurs. And this is when I was like, wow, this actually might be serious. I walked into the room and they had like 20 people in there at a long table. I was like, wow. And, they sat down and they actually wanted to know my story. They were like, what's your story? We've heard a little bit about you in high school. And, I just kind of, spitballed my career for them. And, that went really well. I never ended up having a workout with the Spurs. But again, am I somebody that they would really, do I fit that type of mold, that clean cut, really well-spoken, suit and tie wearing type of individual? No, that's not me. So I probably don't fit that organization's type. So like, I don't really blame them, but I feel like a lot of that stuff plays into it. My background, it's not just, oh, wow, this kid kills. Again, Philly was the same way. They called me in and we talked, and everybody just wants to know about my background. And I'm not going to lie, I'm going to tell them how it is. And, it shouldn't matter, but, they're going to find out one way or the other. So I, tell my story or whatever. And I think that a lot of people that's too hard for them. Honestly, it's like, do we want to invest in this guy? He came out of nowhere at 21 years old. Do we really want to invest this guy? I mean, they're scouting dudes who are like 12 years old now, So even back then it was like, I started too old. I started at basically 21, going back to school. I was completely unknown up until that point. And I think for most people, like most NBA teams, like I was just too old. I was too unknown up to that point. Yeah, I had the skill and I was killing, but like, it didn't really matter to them. They were going for like, again, like they are now, potential, what we know. And I was just too unknown.
So I'm curious, have you ever gotten the comparisons to like Chris Birdman Anderson when you look at similar like tattoos, athletic white guy? The NBA it's like the last kind of bastion. I don't want to say last bastion, but like I feel like pro sports people look like through a very racial lens at everything. There's been articles written. I remember I did a college paper on how every draft they're always comparing white players to former white players, black, even when they have like nothing in common game wise. I'm wondering, did you get the Chris Anderson comparisons with like athletic white guy, JUCO background, substance stuff, tattoos? Did you hear that when you were coming out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that type of stuff is never going to end, and it goes for everything. I mean, like you get a white rapper, everybody is going to compare him to Eminem. So it's like everybody, and I find it funny and kind of disrespectful, honestly. Everybody who, to this day, they'll come up to me in the street and ask me if I'm Birdman. And it's just funny to me because it's like, maybe there's some similar characteristics, like visually, but like, really we look nothing alike. And it's just like, okay, so if you saw a black player with tons of tattoos and you saw another black player with tons of tattoos, would you immediately assume that is that individual? No. But for like white people, because you just have there's just not a lot of really big white tatted up people, and so we just stand out like a sore thumb. And so everybody, again, they say ask me if I'm Birdman, this and that. And I remember when I was in the summer league, we were playing the games in Vegas, and like Reggie Miller was doing the play calls or whatever, and he called me Baby Birdman. And I'm just glad that I didn't hear him say that in person, because like, I don't care who Reggie Miller is. We would have had words. I thought that was mad disrespectful. Call me Baby Birdman. Like, no, I'm my own individual. Like, I get what you're saying. You kind of making a joke, but at the end of the day, like, just call me like by my name. It's, I know it can be like funny, you making a joke, but that sort of like, again, it's not being like racist. It's just, Like those types of interpretations, they're never going to end. It's always going to be like that, always.
And it's being lazy to not look at people as individuals and not, look, let's just find a player comp whose game is similar. Like there's always that component.
And we have no similar game whatsoever.
Exactly.
So the comparison to Birdman doesn't make sense. Again, I have a motor.
Yeah.
I've always had a motor my whole career. But other than that, like, no, there's no similarities whatsoever.
Yeah, I know you had skill. You could shoot it from all over the place. He was, just defense. And if it wasn't a dunk, he wasn't putting the ball in the hoop at all. So, I'm curious what happens next. You don't get drafted. I know you said you felt like you were, you had a lot of kind of thoughts in your head up until.
I had a ton of workouts. Yeah, I had a ton of workouts all summer. I was super busy. And right towards the end of the summer, like in August, the Lakers offered me a training camp deal. And I signed right away. I was like, okay, like this looks good. I got with my agent. Up to that point, I had my overseas contracts were like 70, 80,000. I had like one for like 90,000. And I told my agent, I said, if something comes for 100,000 or more, I'll take it. Like I can't turn down that kind of money. For me, where I come from, like $100,000 is like my life has changed immediately. So I couldn't turn down a contract for $100,000. I didn't care what the training camp deals look like. So I accepted the Lakers training camp deal, and then maybe a month later, right the first week in September, a team in Spain came at me with an offer for 110, and I was like, oh, I gotta take it. So we got out of the Lakers training camp deal, which now in hindsight I probably would have taken. Obviously, like, again, I have no regrets throughout my career, but and again, I wasn't the same player later in my career as I was at that moment, but that roster was so weak on the Lakers that year that like I probably honestly could have made that roster. But again, like I said, like where I come from, like that $110,000, like that changes my life immediately. My whole future has changed at that moment. I take that deal. So I backed out of the LA deal and went overseas for the first time. And again, that was just like a massive, massive reality check for me. I'd never left the United States. I had never been on an airplane for that long. I knew nothing about other countries. And like all of that combined with the fact that I just had the craziest type of like first coach that you could have.
Who was it?
Really just all snowballed into me leaving midway through the season. I had Macho Fernandez. I don't know if that's his last name.
Monsalve. Macho Monsalve. I know exactly what you're talking about. Now, where was the
he's
team?
Still there. He's still there. Obradio, Santiago in Spain.
In Santiago de Compostela. Okay, yeah.
And so, so I get to Spain. Right away, I'm like, wow. We were training twice a day, every single day. We were going at 9. We'd do weights for an hour, and then we would practice for 2 hours, and then we would come back at 7 and practice 7 to 9:30 every single day. And I was just like shocked. I was like, not that I thought it would be easier, but I was just like waiting for that moment when we were going to like dial it back. Oh, we didn't do any sort of individual training. It was literally just team, like running up and down, defense. That's all we did. And still, I was being I was getting along with everybody. It was my first year. I had no idea what to expect, so I had no expectation. I was just like, okay, I'm just going to come here, do what I need to do, get a bigger contract, and just like everything was just stepping stones for me. So preseason is about to finish. I had a really good preseason, and the team comes to my agent and is like, we want to sign Nick for next year. And my agent's like, what? They're like, yeah, we want to sign him for next year. And they offered me 130. And even my agent was like, so I had never played a professional game. We had just finished the preseason, and they came at me with the offer. And I told them straight up, I was like, listen, like I appreciate it so much, like everything, I'm glad that you guys like me, but like I can't make that type of decision. I haven't even played my first game. Like I'm just trying to focus on this season. Boom. As soon as that happened, I was like public enemy number one. Every single day, they're just coming at me in practice. Just everything that I do is wrong. The games come around. I would go like 3 games where I don't play. Another game, I start, I play 20 minutes, I kill. 2 games go by, I don't touch the court. And it just went on like this. And all from that moment when I turned down the deal and they just felt disrespected right at that moment, everything changed. And the final straw was my dad was there at the time, and we were playing somewhere. It was a 10-hour, 11-hour bus ride. And my dad had took a team, it was like a fan bus to the game. And they have great fans there, great fans. And he took a fan bus to the game, like 11 hours. And I was on the court for 30 seconds. I got in the game in the second half. I was running down the court. I'm calling for the ball, wide open on the 3-point line. And like my man was completely lost. And I'm screaming for the ball. The coach subs me out of the game immediately the next play. And he's screaming at me that my job is not to get the ball. My job is to screen for so-and-so and not worry about touching the ball. And that was it. I said at that moment, I'll never put this jersey on again. And so we took the bus back. I got with my agent. And then within one day, he had me transferred to a team in France in Le Havre. And I packed everything up. That night I got back, I packed everything up. I didn't even have a team. And I had my entire apartment packed up and I was ready to go. And, once everything was settled, I'll be honest, the GM was a dick. He gave me like the money that he needed to give me, but he was a dick. Mm-hmm. And the coach sits me down, privately one-on-one in his office. And he's just like my best friend. I can't believe it came to this. How did it get to this? What happened? Just totally just like ignoring the fact of what he's been doing for the last 4 months. And so again, I'm just like, it's all good. Like I'm just moving on with, with what I need to do. And so we parted ways and I ended up going to France, and I really liked the team I went to in France at the time. It was more freestyle basketball. It wasn't so organized, bigs, guards, bigs are down low doing it. It was more just like up and down basketball. And it's still like that. And, I really like Le Havre, the city, all that stuff. So I ended up finishing the year on a good note mentally. But that first 5 months, man, what a test to be like my first experience overseas. Like I was a wreck mentally.
Who was your agent overseas?
Same agent I have till this day, Mick Sandu, and that's a whole nother topic in itself as far as agents. Everybody's always, I do believe that agents do matter to a point. I just feel like if you can trust someone, like that does play a huge part in it. I feel like I got every job I ever earned. I don't feel like my agent ever just like stretched out so far where he got me money that I didn't deserve. Mm-hmm. I feel like it didn't matter who my agent was. Like I was getting the money I was getting because like I earned it. Right. As simple as that. And so, people who go with like big agencies and all that, I mean, everybody has their own choices, but I stuck with the same agent. I felt like I could trust him my whole career. And again, I have no regrets on anything.
So you're overseas. I think you play one more season, and then you have one season in the G League, now G League at least, with the Canton Charge. I think that's your only year in the G League. You play with like John Holland, who's a guy who kind of managed to get into the NBA and then stick around for a couple of years, parts of seasons before going overseas. When you go to the G League, do you start thinking about those NBA dreams again? And were you thinking about them during the season or what was that experience like?
Yeah, so I ended up playing in France, and then I ended up going back to France. Same money. I ended up going back to France for $100,000 again, and I went to Cholet, and it was just like a bad experience, bad team. Like the coach had never coached men before. He had only coached women's basketball. similar situation to the Utah Jazz thing, which is funny. The first day I met this coach, I ran into him in the hallway of the gym, and the dude never made eye contact with me. We had like a 2-minute conversation. He didn't speak English, but like we were like, back and forth a little bit, and all he looked at was my tattoos and my arms. Never looked at my face once. And right then, this was before we had ever been on the court together, and right away I knew it was gonna be bad. And it did. It ended up being bad. It was just not a match made in heaven. But I finished that season, and at that point I was still a little delusional, honestly, as far as like me. I mean, I felt like maybe I wasn't getting my minutes to where I should, or my reps or whatever. But at the same time, I was definitely delusional. Like, I could have been doing more with what I was getting, no doubt. And so, my agent kind of gave me a wake up call, honestly, because like I was getting deals again for the same money the following year. And I was like, man, what's up with this? Like, I'm trying to upgrade. I'm not trying to stay the same every single year. And he was like, look, man, like you're averaging like 2 rebounds a game. Like, this shit is just not going to get it done. If you want more money, like that's, you have to get better at like this, and that. And, that's when I was really kind of like, fuck, like this guy, that is the truth. How do I expect to be getting paid in 2 rebounds a game? And so it was like July. I wasn't getting any offers that I liked. And then Limoges, a team in France who was going to be EuroLeague the following year, they were offering me like 60 grand. I was like, this is like bullshit. I'm not taking this. My agent was like, but they're going to be EuroLeague. Like, you could get your foot in the door, this and that. I'm like, look, I'm not taking 60 grand. They're disrespecting me. They have the money. They're playing EuroLeague. They have the money to pay way more. They're trying to get me for super cheap. I'm not taking it. And so I turned them down. And like right after that, the Cavs called me and they were like, we want you to come to a mini camp. This was Memorial Day. I was still home. And they were like, we want you to come to a mini camp it was like 4 or 5 days in Cleveland. And so I was on the Cape at the time. And so I just, packed up a few days before, drove back out to Michigan, where I had some stuff in my grandfather's house. And then I drove over to Canton and just killed, just the mini camp. There were some guys there, like JR was there. They had a couple like team guys, but mostly it was just like a group of us, like Quinn Cook, John Holland, Don Pointer. And we were just running drills and doing some 5-on-5 stuff or 4-on-4, whoever was there. And like I said, I killed. And so right away they were like, okay, we want you to come to training camp. And my deal was, if I go to training camp, I have to play for their G League team. So like, if I don't make the roster, I have to play for their G League team. And I wasn't getting any deals overseas that I liked anyway. So I was like, whatever. Like, I had played 2 years. I had made enough money to like take at least 1 year to work on myself and, try to take a chance to get a call up in the league or whatever. And so then I went back home for a couple of weeks, and then I ended up going to training camp with the Cavs.
And what was that season like for you? I remember checking the stats some that year and reading, and it seemed like you were one of those guys that was on the cusp of maybe getting a call up. I know it never quite happened, but what was that season like for you?
For me, that was everything. That season defined my career, changed everything about me and who I was as a player. So when I went to Cleveland, just being there, just being in the training camp for 3 weeks, a month, whatever it was, before they started cutting everybody, that experience changed everything for me. Being around LeBron and Kyrie and practicing with these guys. I mean, everything about basketball is confidence. So like when I'm going and I'm playing against Kevin Love and doing all this stuff, and I'm like, dude, I like this. He was coming back from injury, and like we would play sometimes, and like I was frying this guy in practice, and I'm like, this dude's getting like $100 million. You tell me you can't break me up 100, I'm frying this dude. And after that, I didn't get much run in the preseason games. The only game that I got good run in was the game where like other guys didn't play, like LeBron and them didn't suit up. So I got a lot of minutes against Philly and ended up playing really, really well. And I honestly thought they were going to sign me. They didn't have Tristan Thompson. They were waiting on that contract. And so I was like, they need a big, they need a 4 guy. And they ended up signing him. So as soon as his contract was signed, this was like at the end of training camp. As soon as I heard that they had signed him, I was like, okay, I'm done. Then they called me in that day and ended up releasing me, And then I went to the Canton Charge, and like I killed from day one. I killed in the G League, and that's when I just completely changed like who I was as a player and my mentality. There was no more like I'm passing the ball, not to be selfish or whatever, but I was like, I'm here to kill. I'm better than everybody here. My mentality, like if I miss 3-4 shots, like I don't care. I'm here to jack. I'm here to, show that I'm better than everybody else. And it really just changed my game, because that's when I really started to run the floor. I would just seriously, it literally defined my game for the rest of my career. Overseas, I would literally run as fast as I could towards the rim and just seal dudes under the rim and get like 12 points a game just by burying people under the rim on fast breaks. And just adding that to my game and some rebounds. Like I averaged like 20 and 8 in the G League. And that was like the first year. That was the worst year for call-ups in the NBA. The worst. Every other year there's been like 4 times the amount of call-ups. I couldn't believe that I didn't get called up that year. It was bullshit. But yeah, no call-ups that year. And I killed that year, had a ton of 30 plus games. But yeah, it is what it is. I ended up getting, so I was doing summer league every year. So I was playing overseas, and then I was coming back and I was playing Orlando Summer League, Vegas Summer League. And every year it just got worse. So I was in Orlando. I mean, again, it's hard to understand sometimes, but I mean, I would kill in one game, and then I would have like 4 games where like the coach doesn't play me. I go to Vegas. After killing in the D League, the coach from New Orleans is calling my agent like every week. Is Nick coming to Summer League with us? My agent's like, yeah, man, like whatever, he's coming. And even my agent was like, man, this team is like really on you. And so I go down to New Orleans, for a week before Summer League, before we fly out to Vegas together. And that is right when they drafted like, I don't even remember who it was, a scrub or some bum from like Kansas. And he was for same position as me. And like, it just changed everything. The coach who was the coach for the Summer League absolutely hated me, despised me. I have no idea why. I don't even know if I should mention the story between my agent and him, but maybe I will in a little bit. But I get to Vegas, and like, again, I played one game, I think. And the only game that I played, I killed. And every other game I sat on the bench. We had 2 games left, and I got up and I walked out we had 2 games left. And after the third to last game, I got up. I didn't take the team bus. I told them I'm done. I gave them back my shit. I was like, give me my per diem money. I'm going back. I'm going back to Michigan. Like, you don't want me here, I'm not going to be here. So right when I left the team with like 3 games left in Vegas, a team in Russia called me and was like, we want to sign you. And that changed my whole career. So that was like my first big contract. I ended up getting like $225 for the team in Russia. And like I said, everything happens for a reason. That was my last Summer League. I was like, I'm done. I'm never stepping foot in Summer League again. Like, I'm just wasting my time, wasting my summers. Like, every year just seemed like it was the same. These teams would like fall in love with me, and then they would end up drafting guys. And then it just became all about these other guys and not about other people who were trying to make it. So from that moment on, I did Summer League 3 years in a row. And after that, I was like, I'm done. I'm going to enjoy my summers. If an NBA team wants me, they can come get me overseas, but I'm not going to waste my summer doing, 10 mini camps in Vegas and Orlando and all that stuff.
So where has life gone overseas since? Because you've played in a couple different continents. You were in Russia, I think, a couple years, then China, Korea. Now you're in the Middle East. Where has talk about the trajectory of your career and your experiences ever since?
So for me, it's always been about money. Like, I think for most people playing overseas early in their career, for sure, it's like, where you play doesn't matter. It's like, what's the money and am I actually going to get it? And, so I went to Russia, and it was just a perfect situation for me. The president there loved me. The style of play was exactly what I needed. Like, I could do whatever I wanted. I was, super productive. We were playing Champions League and VTB at the time. And I ended up leading both leagues in scoring. So I was like 24 a game. I beat out Lexi Shved in VTB that year for scoring champion. And I led the Champions League in scoring that year at 20 a game as well. And after that, I'm expecting EuroLeague contracts. I'm like, okay, somebody's going to offer me a EuroLeague deal. And like, I just didn't have anything on the table. Like, there was no for sure's. Like, yeah, we want him for, X amount of money. And again, I just couldn't understand. I'm like, it's not like I was just jacking. I was super productive. I was rebounding. I was, playing what most teams could definitely use. And I wasn't getting EuroLeague deals. And then it was like July, and my agent was like, oh, there's this Chinese team that wants you. And I'm like, oh, like, okay, I know there's money over there. And they wanted me to fly to Vegas and meet with them or work out or whatever. And I was like, man, I don't want to go to Vegas to meet these people. And my agent was like, no, you should do it. And so I was like, okay. I'm all packed up. I'm getting ready to leave for the airport. And then they just never ended up calling. We don't hear from them for like a week. And so I'm thinking like, oh, the deal fell through. I had heard the deal was for like $500,000. And I was like, oh, well, it is what it is, And then like 2 weeks go by, I get a phone call. What had happened was the Chinese who were in Vegas, it was like 3-4 people from the team who were there for Summer League. They got their car robbed in the parking lot. All their passports, all their phones, everything was stolen out of the car right the day that I was supposed to go out there. So like, they couldn't contact me or any of that stuff. And so I don't end up having to go out there. They're like, okay, they end up signing me. My agent calls me. It's like midnight. He's like, dude, look in your email. You got a contract for $1 million. And that's when I was like, oh, okay. Like, it changed my life forever. I was like, God, like, okay, like, this is it. And this is what I have been working for. I said from day one, like, this is what I'm trying to work for, a contract for $1 million somewhere. And, yeah, that was it. I didn't care about EuroLeague and staying in Europe and what's better basketball. For me, it was just always about money. So like, I didn't care about how bad the basketball was anywhere else in the world. Like, if somebody's gonna pay me $1 million, like, I'm not gonna stay in Europe because it's better basketball. I'm going because it's for money. And so I ended up going to Shanghai the following year and playing with Jimmer. And like, I hated China. I absolutely hated China, every minute of it. Again, not to sound like disrespectful towards the culture, but it's not like Europe. It's not like anywhere else in the world. It's the complete opposite of anything you've ever experienced. And to be surrounded by like 40 million people all the time is a difficult thing to adjust to. And especially for Americans, like, my diet is very different. We'd go on the road, I would have like 20, 25 cans of tuna in my suitcase. Like, that's what I would eat on the road because there was literally nothing I could eat at the hotels, the team meals, nothing. So I would have just literally my entire suitcase was not clothes or gear. It was just food that I would take on the road because we would go on the road for like 6-7 days at a time. And I mean, it was just absolutely survival. I mean, besides the money aspect, I absolutely hated it when I was there.
You have any experiences like that, Bobby, where you're somewhere and you just couldn't deal with some aspect of it? I know you stayed in Spain for a long time because of, I think you probably enjoyed it over there, but you ever have an experience like that?
I can't say that I did. It was, I mean, even Turkey was pretty nice. I hadn't had any experiences where I just couldn't stand, the atmosphere.
Yeah.
But I can totally understand playing in China. Just the culture is different. It can't be a European culture or an American culture. I mean, I can't imagine trying to have to acclimate myself to it. It must have been rough, man.
Oh, it's not like anything you've ever experienced. Like, it's just a complete opposite of everything you're expecting. And so I get there and, obviously, I'm trying to make the most of it. The first day that I was there in practice. Literally the first day or first week, I'm working out, and we're doing some 5-on-5 stuff. And the court that we worked out in, this is a professional team. The court that we worked out in was like an ice skating rink. Like, this thing hadn't been like fixed or waxed in probably like 40 years. And so I go to stop on a pump fake, and I did something with my foot, and I end up popping my toe, and immediately my toe blows up inside my shoe. And I'm like, fuck, like, am I done? Like, I thought I broke my big toe. And so, like, I'm done. I get home. I couldn't walk, and I was just in excruciating pain. My toe was immediately like 3 times the size. So I'm thinking, like, my big toe is broken. They take me to the hospital the next day, to some backwards ass hospital in some shithole. I swear, like, excuse my language. I'm sorry for that.
No problem.
But like, just some like literally back room in some hospital. Like, there's no doors in the hospital. It was all like plastic sheets. And they take me into this back room to x-ray my toe. No exaggeration. The doctor walks in. Literally, he didn't even stop. He walked in like this, and he turned his head. He walked out after looking at the x-ray, walked in, and then just turned his head and walked out. And then the trainer comes up to me, and he's like, "Oh, the doctor says, like, you're all good. The x-rays, like, no, everything's fine." And I was like, this is some bullshit. Like, this dude didn't even look at the x-ray. And so the team's trying to tell me, like, I'm all good to play, this and that. And I was really trying to prove myself. I was like, I want to make more money here. Like, they're going to pay me no matter what. Even if I sat out the whole year, they had to pay me. It wasn't like Europe. It was guaranteed.
Yeah.
They had to pay me my money. And so I was really trying to prove myself. I took a week off and literally played the entire season on what ended up being a fractured toe. When I finally got back to the United States, I went to a real doctor, and the lady said I had a piece of bone floating around in my toe that I had fractured. And I ended up playing I couldn't barely put my foot inside my shoe the whole season, and I still averaged 30.
Wow. So you go from that. Is the next stop, is it Korea? If I'm looking at your playing stats,
no,
right?
So like, I played with Jimmer. We had a great year. We were like a nobody team. We weren't supposed to do anything. We ended up making the playoffs. We did really well. And then I left, and I'm expecting to be re-signed in Shanghai. And again, China is just like kind of like everywhere else. Like, bigger name is all that matters. It doesn't matter like, oh, like, I was averaging the most points per minute of any player in the CBA at the time. It was, well, Luis Scola, he's retired. He wants to come play. Okay, like, it didn't matter who was better at the time. He had a bigger name. So like, okay, we're not going to re-sign Nick. So I came home, and I had my son like right after I got home from China. And I didn't want to go back to China right away anyways, because like, my son was just born. He was like 2 months old. And so I'm waiting around. It's October. I'm training full time. I'm waiting for a deal from China, because they always cut players and bring players in. And again, my son, he's like 3 months old. My agent calls me. Of course, I'm like preparing, like I said, working out. But my agent calls me. This is Saturday night. Saturday night, my agent calls me at like 11 o'clock at night, and he says, this Chinese team, Xinjiang, wants to sign you. Your plane ticket is tomorrow morning at 7. And I was like, Jesus, dude, you can't push this back like 1-2 days. Like, I got a 3-month-old kid in the other room, and a wife, and you know what I mean? And they were like, if you want the contract, your flight is at 7 a.m. tomorrow. So this is 11 p.m. So, I'm packing up my life and signing contracts, until like 4 o'clock in the morning, and then go to the airport in Orlando, get on the plane, fly to Xinjiang. Actually, I had to fly to Hong Kong first for 4 days to do like paperwork, and then I was going to fly to meet the team. And so, like, again, like on 4 hours notice, like, I had to leave my family. I had because they weren't going to come with me. And so I had no idea how long I was going to be gone for. And I get to Hong Kong, we get everything sorted out. I go to Xinjiang. And I mean, again, China's just the pollution was so bad in this city. And the coach from Shanghai ended up being the coach in Jinyang. So this is how I ended up getting the deal in Jinyang. They ended up swapping coaches. So my previous coach was the coach I was going to. And so it was all good. Like, I really liked this guy who's an Australian guy who had been in China for a long time. Gorman is his name. He's like a legend in Australia, and he's a good dude. And he brought me in. But the day that I arrived in Jinyang, they fired him.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, damn, this is just, I already knew what time it was for me. So like, I knew I was only going to be there a month, because the deals were month to month going, if you were a replacement player in China. And so once they fired him, I knew I was only going to be there a month. So the day that I get there, they fire the coach that brought me in, and he was on a guaranteed. So he was still around, but they just made him an assistant coach and brought in just like this Chinese coach who was he coached the Chinese military team. And I mean, this dude just absolutely hated me. And so I was just there training for longest month of my life. We would go to the court. He would line us up. We would talk for easily an hour before we would play, just standing there in line. And he would just stand there and talk to everybody. And then we would practice for like 2.5 hours. Longest month of my life. And I ended up leaving again right after that 30 days and going back to the United States, which I couldn't be happier about. Again, the money was crazy. It was like $130K just for that month. But I mean, talk about, man, it was just torture. Again, I am in it for the money, but man, it was just absolute torture mentally.
So you've got a young child now, which is something that you've never had before at this point in your career. How does that change or impact the trajectory of your career? Because you've gone back now and you've had some other stops. And where are you at this point in your career?
Yeah, it changes everything. I mean, one thing most people don't think about is when you have a family and you're going overseas, changes absolutely everything about your decision making. I came back and ended up going to Puerto Rico and killed there, and then ended up going to Korea, and which is a place I wanted to play and really enjoyed. But once you start having, as the kids age is when it really changes. When they're younger, you can kind of go anywhere. I didn't want to take my kids to China. So, I mean, I was kind of glad that I had moved on from that, just for environment factors. But like, my family really enjoyed Korea, really family friendly. I really liked it there. Spent 2 years there. And then after that, I was waiting around again for a contract after my second year, and Dubai came up, and I knew nothing about Dubai. And I was just like, whatever. I didn't pay it any attention, and then I still didn't have a deal. So I was like, I'll just go and I'll see what it's like. The money was good. So I just took it, and then I ended up loving it over there, and ended up, playing for the same team 2 years in a row. And then we'll see what happens next year. Like I said, right now things are just a little bit different. Again, as your kids age, everything changes. So my kid was able to go to school there and all that, and that's great. But like, picking up in the middle of the season and all that is just different. So like, right now, my kid, he's already enrolled in school here in Florida. Like, I don't plan on going anywhere right away anyways. I don't plan on ever playing another full season of basketball. I do plan on going somewhere, playing maybe a half year, getting picked up, but like, I can't do August to June anymore. I just don't have that in me mentally. And again, if my family isn't going to come, I don't want to do a full year anyways, because once they're in school, it's really hard to get it in and out of schools, especially if they're not public. For my son, it's a Montessori school. And it's kind of funny, you were mentioning earlier how, when you were saying, oh, you're in the city and you have so much to do, and you feel bad for kids in the suburbs. What I meant to mention when you said that was kind of the same goes for suburban kids in school and like private school. Like, my son, he's in a private school right now. It's like a Montessori school. You have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And I'm like half in, half out with this sort of stuff. I grew up in public school system. I know they're not the best, but I also believe like that's where like you learn how to survive.
Yeah.
And like, this private school stuff, this is all new to me. I didn't grow up with money. I don't know anything about this life. And like, it's nice to be able to have that for my son and to provide that sort of like stuff. But at the same time, like, I tell my wife, I'm like, again, I'm like half in, half out. It's, I believe you should go to like a public high school. I believe you should go to like a public, at some point you should be going to, it shouldn't just be private school. I just feel like, I don't know, kind of like he was in the school in Dubai, and, we came back, this year I'm coming to America. I'm trying to tell him, I'm like, yo, man, it's time to get back into reality. He's only 6 years old, but I'm like, you're in reality now. It's not this, again, different cultures and all that, but, like in Dubai, they don't have poor people. They don't have like, not to say they don't have violence, but they don't have anything. Everybody's just well off. Everybody's, we're all winners. We're all, we're all well off, and we don't have to worry about anything. And like, life is just great. And I'm just like, listen, man, like, you're back into reality now, especially when he's like playing sports and now he's doing YMCA training. I'm trying to tell him, hey, man, we're not here just to have fun. Yeah, he's 6 years old. I want you to have fun, but like, it's time for you to start understanding, like, not everybody's a winner. You're not going to win all the time. You do have to, even, again, he's only 6 years old, but it's like, it's hard to learn that when you're in private school. I can't really explain it any other way.
It's a private school's a bubble.
It's a bubble. And again, there's a lot of people who go on to do great things in sports being in private school. But I just worry about like the mental side, because I don't know. It's a survival aspect.
I grew up in public school in the city, and there were certainly a lot of drawbacks, but like, I've said it before, I feel like my life was forever changed for the better by growing up and experiencing life surrounded by so many different people. My school was like, I think 35% white and like 65% other. So like, it was majority minority. White was probably the largest single demographic, but like, you had rich kids from West Cambridge, you had public housing, you had like, and it was just a great experience for me to get to know so many different people and see like, hey, there's all different walks of life, and there's middle ground that we can end up finding between different people and all that. And also just like what public school may lack in, like, I don't know, small class size and whatever, which is a great, like, there's also so many different like extracurriculars and things that kids can get into through a public school. So it's really hard. And I think fatherhood in general, just, I don't know, I've felt pressure in sports, I felt pressure in jobs, I felt pressure in everything, but I've never felt the same kind of pressure as like being a dad and being like, I don't want to mess my kids up, and like, I want to make the right decisions. And I have no guidance at all, because both my parents have passed away. So it's like, I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. So it's like, fatherhood definitely changes.
I don't
things.
I don't think anybody knows what they're doing. I don't think anybody knows what they're doing when they become parents, But I'm a big believer in, like, it doesn't matter like where my kid goes to school, like what he's really truly going to learn is going to come from me. And so, yeah, you do want like a better education for your kids. No, there's no doubt about that. Yeah. But I feel like everything that he's truly going to become and know, I'm going to teach him like at home every day with me. So it's not, in my opinion, again, I'm for home. Like, I'm not against homeschool. I think homeschooling is like, just makes kids a little weird. They don't get to interact as much with other kids.
Yeah.
But I truly believe like what kids learn the most is what they're going to learn at home.
Definitely agree with that.
The class size is bigger, but to each his own.
I definitely agree that the biggest education kids get is what they learn at home. And I know we've talked for a long time, because it's been an incredible conversation. And, Bobby and I have done things on fatherhood, Bobby's dad, and it's almost like maybe there's a whole other episode there. But I wanted to ask you, going all the way back to the beginning, the things early on in your life that were obstacles, that were struggles, that was like dark times, addiction, all that. Does that influence you as a dad? Does that influence your fears for your son? Like, how does that impact you, the struggles that you had?
100%. I mean, I don't think really just like the struggles that I had, but just the lifestyle. I try to put everything into perspective. Again, I told you, like on the Cape when I was a kid, I mean, we literally did whatever we wanted. Like, there was no like, oh, like, mom, dad, like, can I go do this? Like, we would just grab our bikes and we were gone. We would just go adventure into the woods and just do our own thing. And like those experiences, like although I did that, like, there's no way that I would allow my son to act like that. It's just a different time and a different place here in Florida and all that. So like, yeah, there's positive things that I'm trying to learn. I'm not worried about, you know, just the drug aspect. And, you know, again, like kind of the public school thing, my wife, oh, there's so many drugs in public schools and this. And then I'm like, listen, there's drugs in every single school. I don't care if it's private or not. It doesn't matter. So like none of that to me makes any difference. But I just, my experiences, like, don't worry. I don't worry about anything involving my kids following in like my footsteps or anything like that. It's just such a different, it's almost hard to imagine, but it's just such a different world now than it was even just 15, 20 years ago. But I think people really overcomplicate it. I just try to keep my kids like locked into what they're doing, try to experience everything. I'm not pressuring them to do anything. I just want them to be outside, be outdoorsy type of kids. I want them to play sports. Maybe they'll end up hating them, but I'm not going to have my kid out in the driveway training and trying to, you know, get them on Instagram followers and do all this weird stuff that you see parents doing now. I'm just not into any of that side of stuff. I mean, I would probably, like, who knows if I was a kid when I was doing that, what I would even be like as a person. So, you know, I just want them to just experience everything and just be there to just guide them. Again, just as a safety aspect, not to put a bubble around them, but just to teach them, like, you can experience anything in this world you want, literally anything, but it's just a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And that's it. It's just teaching that you can, again, anything you want to do. You can go jump out of airplanes. You can go move. You can move anywhere. That's the beauty of the United States. You can live anywhere and do anything you want to do if you do it the right way.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today, man. It was really, really, really an awesome conversation. I think it was
been an awesome guest.
Just truly inspiring story, man. And we hope that you will come back on. We're going to be moving into a new podcast studio soon. If you ever get back up to Massachusetts, would love to see you in person. But would love to have you back on again and check in and see maybe what the next chapter is for you.
Yeah, no, man, I really appreciate it. You know, I'm sorry if I rambled a little bit, but yeah, like I said, I mean, I just love talking about kind of not just my life in general, but I mean, just trying to help people. It's just amazing what you can do with even just like the smallest opportunities. I mean, all I ever wanted to do with basketball was be able to go to school, and then once I finished school, all I ever wanted to do was make enough money to buy a house. And I mean, just, if you really truly just lock in and believe in yourself, I mean, it's not as hard as people think it is. It's literally baby steps. I think people see a big picture and they instantly fold up. But you know, I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Well, thank you once again, Nick. Thank you so much for joining us, man.
Appreciate you, Nick.
No problem, man. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.